and those with them started scattering and running. And so they chased them and followed them and pursued after them. And there were a lot of small battles after that. And in fact, Gideon enlisted more help from different tribes. So that's where we are now, towards the end of this, as we're finishing up Gideon freeing the Israelites from the oppression of the Midianites. So we're still on this part of Gideon's life. Gideon, the faith-filled man. We started off with Gideon the fearful, and then Gideon the follower of God, Gideon the fighter, and now Gideon the faith-filled man. That we start with him asking for signs. God, I need a sign. God, I don't know about this. God, I don't know if this is going to work. To now he is speaking as though things were already going to happen. The battle was already going to be won. He's speaking it as if it was won, and it hasn't even been fought yet. And so now we see the faith-filled man. The first judge of Israel, we're just going to rehearse this a little bit, was Othniel. His enemy was Mesopotamia. Second judge was Ehud. That's when Ehud kills Eglon, the king of Moab. The third judge is Shamgar. Not much was spoken about him, but he fought the Philistines. The fourth judge was Deborah, the only lady judge. Canaanites was the enemy then. Now we're in the fifth judge of Israel, and that is Gideon. Of course, the enemy is the Midianites. Here's the thought for these 12 verses tonight. Simply put, you know this phrase very well. You reap what you sow. Anybody know who Ron Hamilton is? He wrote, "Oh, rejoice in the Lord, he makes." So when he was younger, a young adult, he went to the doctor and found out that one of his eyes had cancer in it, and they had to take out the eye. And so he showed up to church after the process with a patch over his eye. And so all the kids called him, "Oh, look, it's Patch the Pirate." And so that's when his children's ministry took off. And so I grew up listening to the Patch the Pirate stories. And he would have all kinds of cassette tapes and CDs about his different adventures on this pirate ship, going to different lands. And one of them was going to Australia, and the whole story and the law of the boomerang. The idea is if you throw a boomerang, for those who know how to use them, I throw them and it don't come back to me. They go over there someplace. But you throw a boomerang and it's supposed to come back. The same idea is that you reap what you sow. And so we're going, Galatians chapter 6, 7 through 9. I did not put this in the font that I was trying to find. But be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. We live in a world where even Christians think that they can sow in the flesh and somehow reap the Spirit. Somehow have fruits of the Spirit. It's not possible. But he that soweth to the Spirit, so of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Let's not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. Keep those verses in your mind. We may come back to that at the very end, but those three verses kind of sums up this passage and the idea that we're going to be talking about tonight. So back in Judges chapter 8, starting with verse number 10. So we just finished. Remember, Gideon goes to the men of Succoth and the men of Penuel and just asks for bread. Can you give us some bread? Give us some food. We're hungry. And they say, do you have the heads of Zebah and Zalmunna? And they're like, no, we're headed that way. And then they say, we will not help you or give you bread unless you do this first. And then Gideon said, well, if that's the case, we are going to beat them. And when we do, I'm going to come back, and you're not going to like it. I'm going to give you the consequences of you not helping us. And now we're in verse 10. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their host with them. So here's the two kings and their armies with them. About 15,000 men, all that were left of all the host of the children of the east. So Gideon and his army has done a great job. There was a multitude of them, now only 15,000 are left. For there fell 120,000 men that drew the sword. 120,000 have died, only 15,000 are now alive. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwell in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbehah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And when Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued after them, and took the two kings of Midian and Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host. Verses 10 through 12, we're going to look at this. A faith that is growing will be built into a bold faith. A faith that is growing is going to be built into a bold faith. So as our faith grows, we become more bold, not because of us, not because of what we have in us, but because of what we have already seen that faith can do. So we become bold knowing that God is going to take care of us. We found that Gideon was not a very bold man. But as we have watched him through this process, he is now very bold in his dealing with God and the people of Israel. Gideon leads a surprise attack against the two kings of Midian. So now he's going against them. This was not the 300 versus the massive army, but the numbers were not in the favor of Gideon. It wasn't like that he was on the up and up. He was the underdog. He was not supposed to win this, even though he had already smote 120 of the men. A commentary said this: we can suppose that Gideon was bold enough to do this because he saw God do great things in similar circumstances before. Have you ever wondered why we are not seeing great things done in our lives by God and through us? Maybe because we have not seen it in the past in our lives, and it's hard for us to have that faith. But Gideon sees it. He's seeing what God can do, and it makes him more bold. The previous work of God encouraged him to trust God for great things in the present now. Allow the victories in the past to make us more bold and to build our faith in God. A faith that is growing will also be a persistent faith. I'm not going to back down. My faith is growing, so I'm going to be consistent and persistent. I'm not going to quit. Even though the road is long and the load is heavy, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up. Gideon didn't stop until the battle was won. Well, I'm happy with this victory. I think I'm going to be done now. No, Gideon wasn't happy with that one victory. He wanted the war to be won, not just the small battles in his life. If you reap a quitting attitude, let's back that train up. If you sow a quitting attitude, you will reap losses instead of victories. As I'm reading that, I'm like, that does not make sense. We're going to reverse that. If you sow a quitting attitude, then you will reap losses instead of victories. I know not everybody in here is a sports fan, but I happen to be a sports fan, as you know well. And we're in the NBA Finals, the championship games, and I kind of watched towards the end there. My mind goes back to the 90s when my family would get together and just watch games. And there's one particular game, if I'm not mistaken, the one team was down about 7, 8 points, somewhere around there, with literally like 7, 8 seconds left in the game. Most people are like, well, I'm just done. I quit. There's no way we cannot score 8 points in that many seconds. Come to find out, you can. A guy didn't give up, and he shot, made it, stole the ball, shot, made it, got fouled, shot, and they won the game. He just refused to say, no, what, I am done. Until my coach used to say, until the last buzzer sounds, the game's not over. You may have heard, until the fat lady sings, it's not over yet. Don't stop. Don't quit until our final breath. Even if we are old and decrepit and cannot move, God still has a plan for us until we take that final breath. Now, verses 13 through 17. And Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle before the sun was up. So now the war is over. What do you think Gideon's going to do? Go back to the men of Succoth, go back to the men of Penuel and say, hey, the battle's over. Now it's time to reap the consequences of what you did. So he caught a young man of the men of Succoth and inquired of him. Basically, he said, hey, I want to interrogate you. And the young men described unto him the princes of Succoth and the elders thereof, even 70 men. So he says, hey, man, show me the princes. Who are the elders? How many? What do they look like? And he came unto the men of Succoth and said, behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, with whom ye did upbraid me, of whom you said no, of whom ye mocked me, of whom you would not help, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread and unto the men that are weary? And you mocked us, verse number 16. And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. That is a nice way of saying he whooped them. He got the briars, he got the I never did this, but my dad did. His mom used to tell him, go get me a switch. Go cut your own switch. Did y'all cut your own switches growing up? Oh, you lucky people. They would cut their own switch. That's what he did. He went out the briars and the thistles, and he made a whip, and he taught them a lesson. The lesson that he taught them was, you reap what you sow. You didn't want to do it now. I told you I would win the battle. I did. Now I am back. Verse number 17. And he beat down the tower of Penuel and slew the men of that city. So he does what he says he's going to do to the men of Succoth. Now the next city, he said the same thing. I ain't going to help you until we have the men, until you finish the battle. We're going to learn verses 13 through 17 is this. Gideon did not forget the attitude that the men of Succoth had sown. Sometimes you reap what you sow is not always about actions. It's about attitude. Have you, I'm assuming everybody in this room has eaten fast food at some point. Have you ever gone to we ate a lot, well, obviously we had to eat out on our vacation, but we ate some different restaurants and things. And we had this one waiter who was good. Like, he was just good. Reminds me of her uncle. Just comical person, easy to talk to, just knew how much to say to us, but not be overbearing. We were sitting there. He was taking some desserts to another table. He had to pass by our table. He looks at us like, trying to get us to get dessert. Just that type of thing. And so therefore, because he had a pleasant attitude, what does that make the customers have? A pleasant attitude. If he was tired and cantankerous and upset and showed that, what would he get back more than likely from the customers? Not pleasantries, right? Very stern, probably not a good tip. So the idea is, it's not always actions, but Gideon did not forget the attitude. Not just the word, but the attitude that they showed. The men of Succoth, as I just said, once refused to help Gideon because they lacked the faith. I don't think you're going to win, Gideon. I ain't going to help you until you prove to me that you can win. And Gideon says, oh, we're going to win. It's not about if, it's about when. But they said, no, prove it to me first, or we will not help. A lack of faith. A lack of faith will always result in failures. The Christian life, the reason why we fail, the reason why we sin, the reason why we get down in the dumps, the reason why we stumble is because of lack of faith. We just don't trust God enough to carry us through, to help us through, to be the promise keeper that he is. So Gideon found a young man from Succoth and interrogated him to find out who the leaders of the city were. The young man gave Gideon the information, and Gideon was a man of his word. It's interesting. Do you remember when Gideon, in the beginning of this chapter, I believe, the men of Ephraim, at the end of the last chapter, the men of Ephraim was inquired by Gideon, said, hey, I need your help. Can you go take care of these people? And they said yes, and they did it. The next chapter opens up with the men of Ephraim being mad. Why didn't you call us now? Why weren't we in the main battle? Why did you wait so long to pick us, to ask us? Gideon did not respond with whippings. He responded with more grace. But Gideon is a man of his word because he said, when he said to them, I'm going to come back and I'm going to give you the consequences. And he told them what they would be. The men of Succoth and Penuel had a choice. Oh, I believe you. Gotcha. Let me go ahead and give you bread. I do believe that if they had given him bread even after the judgment that Gideon gave them, I do not think this would have happened to them. But they stood by what they thought was true, and so Gideon said, I'm going to stand by what I said as well. Gideon whipped the leaders of Succoth, probably as a method of public rebuke. Back in the day, in the middle of the town, they would whip people as an example. So he's saying this is what happens when you don't have faith. A lack of faith has consequences. The men of Penuel also refused to help Gideon when he needed help. Gideon was a man of his word. He did exactly to the men of Penuel in the tower there that he said he would do. He tore down the tower. I'm going to come back. I'm going to tear down the tower. He came back and did just that. I wish we had more politicians like Gideon. Not that he was a politician, or just more men and women and Christians who said, I'm going to do, and they do. And not trying to play even a political game. I'm not big in politics at all. I do know that every politician is political. They are trying to play a game. And so I grew up in that. I kind of heard that. And so now Christians are trying to do the same thing, trying to be political and living the God-like lifestyle and the world-like lifestyle at the same time. We need men and women Christians who are people of the word. If you sow doubt, you will reap losses. If you sow doubt, you will reap losses. My wife and I had a chance, Myrna, you might appreciate this, that I know you don't watch much of football out where I'm from, but there is a football team called Florida State Seminoles. If you watched it all growing up, you would know they won several titles, those types of things. And so Bobby Bowden was the coach, Christian man. My dad got his autograph and stuff. And so I never have been to a college football game but once in my life. It was to an FSU game. Somebody gave me and my wife tickets. So we sat at the very top, but it was still fun. And so the first time in my life, I'm watching the Jumbotron, the big old TV, and they are playing the hype-up speech that the coach gives to the players before they run out on the field. As he's speaking, I was ready to play football. I was like, give me a helmet. Let's do this. I can do this. I'm like, if those boys cannot play after such a speech, it's over. If that coach had said, guys, I'm pretty sure we can't win. Let's just go out there and try. If we win, we win. But don't really hurt yourselves because I doubt we're going to win. Do you think they're even going to come close to winning? Well, no. Why? They were sowing doubt. What are you going to reap? A loss. So we're in our Christian life. If we sow doubt, I don't think God can. Can God do this? Can God do that? Is he able? Can God do this? What's going to happen? A loss. If we don't believe God can, then we will lose. Just like the children of Israel said, can God deliver food for us in this wilderness? Can God do this? Can God do that? They were reaping the losses, spiritual losses in their lives. Now, verses 18 through 21. Then said he unto Zebah and Zalmunna. So they're not dead yet. These are the kings of Midian. They obviously know, heard, or seen firsthand what he just did. So he says to them, what manner of men were they whom ye slew at Tabor? So this must have been a battle that we were not privy of in the scriptures. So something went on the Battle of Tabor where these two men were, and so some people died. And so Gideon's trying to figure out exactly the information, who died, who did you kill? And they answered, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king, verse 19. And Gideon responds with this. With that statement, he knows. They were my brethren, even the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had saved them alive, I would not slay you. Verse number 20. And he said unto Jether his firstborn, up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared because he was yet a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise thou and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna and took away the ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Interesting passage here. Do you think the old Gideon, when we first meet him, would have done such things? No. No way. He would say, God, give me a sign if I'm supposed to kill these guys. But verses 18 through 21, Gideon now turns his focus to the two kings of Midian. It's interesting that this passage did not come before the last. that he did not kill them and then go back to the men of Succoth and Penuel, but he turned his focus to them, and Gideon interrogated them about who they killed in Tabor. So apparently, he found out that his brothers have died. Not just his brothers in arms or his spiritual brothers, but his actual brothers, his physical kin. That they had died, and he's asking them, did you kill them? Who did you kill in this town? And Gideon finds out that it was his brothers that were killed. No doubt these two kings knew that. No doubt they were smart enough to figure out he's asking us about a particular battle. And I believe that these two kings made a public example of those brothers. It wasn't just like they were fighting and sword fighting and bam, that guy died. That they on purpose, that they, I would say, even executed these brothers of Gideon. And that's why Gideon responds with how he responds. And that's why these two kings said, we deserve death. No, we deserve to die. Gideon gives the kings an eye-opening statement. And what was that? If you had not killed my brothers, I would save your life. I would not kill you. But because you did that, I'm going to do this. That's what makes me believe that how they killed his brothers is similar to how Gideon is killing him now. That they had a chance to free them or put them in prison or whatever the case may be. They could have been leaders of the army or leaders, kings type of thing. And so a lot of times they would save the king's life. So we see this, that you reap what you sow. I don't find it funny, but I find it intriguing, or I guess curiosity gets the best of me when I'm watching something, a show or a movie or news, or find out on Facebook or something, whether it's real life or fake, that bullies or bullying kids, and somebody finally stands up to them, and they get a black eye or something, and they're like crying that they're the victims. Well, I'm not saying violence is the answer, but I am saying you reap what you sow. If they had shown kindness, then they would get kindness back. You reap what you sow. The two kings knew they were deserving of death. What a dialogue that must have been. When Gideon says to his son to execute them. In the style of, I would dare say it would be a chopping of the head. So it would be like an executioner with a, not a guillotine, but with his sword. And so the guy was young, scared. Either scared of death itself, scared of the kings, scared of the blood, scared of something, and he picks up the sword, and no doubt he's like thinking to himself, I can't do this, and he stops. And the kings say something to the effect of, what is in the man is, the strength of the man is who he is. Kill me. Be a man. Show your character and do what needs to be done. And Gideon does just that. Before we get into the closing here, here's a thought I want to kind of dwell on for a few seconds is this. We must live with a constant reminder that we reap what we sow. My dad used to say this. I'm guessing it's one of the laws of thermodynamics. He never told me that, but I'm pretty sure it is. I would go to my dad, and I won't do this to you because you're not my dad. But I'll go to my dad sometimes when he wasn't expecting it when I was a teenager. He'd be like, do something, I would be like, wham, right in the arm. And he'll look at me. He would not respond. He'll look at me and say, son, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Like, whatever, Dad. And I wasn't expecting it. Wham! Oh, yeah, I remember. What we would do, I never did this to my mom because my mom would laugh me up. But when we got older, my sister and I, when we got older, and if we would have been down to get something, or my dad been down and we were walking by, you can bet your bottom dollar that we are going to go wham right on the backside. I was older, my dad bent over, and I lit him up. Wham! And Dad turns around half mad and half like, I'm going to. And he just kind of smiles. I thought to myself, cool. I got away with that. He was a bigger and stronger man than I was when I was a teenager. I wasn't paying attention. I bent down. He came behind me, hit my backside, almost lifted me off my feet. I held my backside, my scooter is what my aunt calls it. And I looked at it, and he just smiles and says, for every action, there was an equal and opposite reaction. I said, you're right. I don't think I hit him much after that. Right? You reap what you sow. So we should have a constant reminder that every action that we do in life, every thought that we think, every word that we say, every motive that we have, we are reaping the things that we are putting out. If we sow this, we're going to reap the flesh. If we sow in the Spirit, we're going to reap the Spirit. Here are some facts. These are obvious things. I'm not an agriculture person by any stretch of the imagination. I don't garden. I don't grow things. I tend to kill things if I put it in soil. But these three things, you know to be facts, but I'm going to apply them in our lives. Number one is this. I've already mentioned what? You reap what you sow. Here's the idea. If I sow apple seeds, am I going to reap a peach tree? No. If I sow okra, I'm using okra because I like okra. If I sow okra, and then the plants are blooming or whatever, it's time to reap the harvest, and I go out there and I look at it and I see okra and I get mad and say, I was wanting potatoes. You think you're crazy. Then you should have planted potato seeds or whatever you plant, whatever that is, right? You reap what you sow. So why do we as Christians, something happens in our lives, we say, well, that's not fair, then maybe you are reaping what you sowed. Number two is this. You reap what you sow, but number two, you reap after you sow. And we don't know when that time's going to be. But it's always after. Never before, always after. I sow, and I'm going to reap at some point. It is a law. It's a statement. It's a fact. You're going to reap what you sow and reap after you sow. But number three is this. You will always reap more than you sow. If I plant an apple seed, am I going to get one apple? I'm going to get one apple tree, but a whole bunch of apples. You always reap more than you sow. I will end with this illustration. I was a kid very sensitive to rich foods, chocolate, that type of thing. It was just, not a very hard stomach I had. My parents went off on a date or something, out to eat or whatever, and they dropped us off at my grandparents' house, and they like to spoil us like all grandparents should. And so my dad tells my grandfather, do not give him any chocolate after a certain time. Don't do it. Oh, I won't do that, David. Okay. So sometime that night, I had chocolate milk with chocolate ice cream with chocolate syrup. I enjoyed it. It was great. Dad picks me up. My mom and dad picks me up. We're on the way home, and my dad found out what I had the hard way. He could see the results. He could smell the results. He says, Dad, did you give Stephen chocolate like I said not to? I only gave him a little bit, and I can attest it was not a little bit. He says, I told you. And so although it was something small that I ate, the results lasted a whole lot longer. It was a lot more than what I was expecting and my grandfather was expecting. You always reap more than what you sow. Whether it is you're sowing kindness, you're sowing good, then you reap that. Not because of karma. That's not what I'm talking about. Because God blesses you. He will load you down with big benefits. But if you reap to the flesh, you can rest assured there's going to be a lot more that you sow than what you thought you would. Again, we're in with this thought. You reap what you sow. These men, 2 different times, they reaped what they sowed. Let's pray to God. Thank you for all you've given us. Thank you for a time we can come and worship you. Help us to constantly live with that reminder in our hearts and minds that, yes, we reap what we sow. Be careful what we say, what we think, what we do. Because we reap what we sow. Help us to sow the Spirit and not the flesh. We love you. Just now I pray. Amen. Don't forget Sunday.